So good morning. Our subject today is linked to the infinite. Now, normally when we use the word infinite, we mean something which is endless, vast, immeasurable, and universally omnipresent. And we use this term traditionally in religious canonical literature. So there is a statement in the Hebrews, in the Bible, I am the Alpha, the beginning, and the Omega, the end, and the first and the last. Jesus Christ is said to have made this statement in the Hebrews. It's a very, very profound statement. I hear in this statement, I am the Alpha and Omega. I cannot signify a being with a definite form, name, and certain characteristics, because the moment you define a person in terms of name and form and characteristics, you are limiting, you are confining that person within certain dimensions. And then that being ceases to be infinite. Infinite should be endless, and therefore it should be beginningless. It should be omnipresent, and it should be the transcendental reality. Strikingly, you'll be surprised, there is almost an identical statement in the ancient Hindu Vedantic text of Bhagavad Gita. Ahamatma gudakesha sarvabhudasya sthitaha ahamadischa madhyamcha bhutanam antayevacha. I should translate in English and then you understand the striking similarity between the statement in the Gita and the Bible, the biblical statement. Ahamatma Gudaish, Lord Krishna uses the term I, very much as Jesus uses the word I. The term used in Sanskrit language is Sarvabhudasya Sthitaha. The great commentator Shankaracharya interprets Sarvesham Bhutanam Antaha Kridisthitaha. The meaning is this: I, the absolute reality, is present in all living beings within their hearts. The word should be translated within the heart of their hearts. That would be more accurate translation of the Sanskrit expression. I am residing, I am present in the heart of hearts of all beings. And then the third and fourth lines say that residing within the heart of hearts of all beings, I control and regulate the entire creation. And there is a much more profound statement: I am the beginning, I am the middle, I am the end. Aham adischa, madhyamcha, bhutanam antayevacha. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of everything in this world. Now, such a being cannot be defined in terms of certain characteristics, So you can say a flower is blue or white or red. It's characteristic. But you can't verbalize, you can't define or describe the infinite reality. Now, the infinite reality should be beyond time, beyond space, and beyond causation. That's why you can find two levels of evolution in human history, in the history of human thought, to be more precise. Two types of evolutions. At one level, we evolve. The human beings evolve from gross to the subtle, from a less profound state of philosophical speculation and interest and rational understanding to a more profound, to a more subtle philosophical understanding of the universe. This evolution, this growth takes place at a human level. The primitive man, his highest idea of life in this world was to get enough food to eat, and maybe when it rains in the evening to take shelter in a cave. At the gross level. But today, the civilized human beings need much more sophisticated arrangements for food, for shelter, and also for recreation, for intellectual or mental entertainment. Now this is with regard to the evolution at the very primitive level. Now, at the philosophical level, every human being has what could be called an ideal of life. The supreme goal, something. A businessman wants to become a billionaire. A sportsman dreams of maybe getting an Olympic medal. A writer dreams of getting Booker Prize or Nobel Prize or whatever it is. Everyone in any field has got a dream, has got an ideal. This called American dream, everyone is talking about. It's so well known in this country. Now, every living being, human being, has got an ideal that he or she aims at, strives to reach. Now, the ideal very often reflects his or her cultural and intellectual level of evolution. What we aim at speaks a lot about what we actually are. A highly evolved person will aim at something sublime, something higher. He will not be satisfied, or she will not be satisfied with anything very mundane, very empirical. Similarly, our idea of God also evolves in proportion to, in line with our own evolution. At the most primitive level, everyone thinks that his or her God is a special God with whom she or he has a special understanding. That's why the ideal of chosen race, which is not only confined to the Judaism religion or Hebraic tradition, you find such ideas in the ancient Hindu tradition also, in Christian tradition also. You can always find, in all religious traditions you find, my God has got a special understanding with me. So there is a kind of an agreement. We call it covenant in the canonical theological sense. But this concept as such existed in all organized religions. Either Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, everywhere. Now, this is not wrong, but this is certainly not the highest conception of the absolute reality. As we evolve to a higher and higher spiritual level, our vision improves, it becomes more broad, our horizon also expands, and then we try to include in I the entire fellow human beings. And then our understanding of God also improves, expands, grows, evolves. And then we think the God whom I worship is the God of the whole creation. So that leads to the idea of one Father and the rest of creation, His children, this idea. Now, Vedanta says at the highest level, at the highest spiritual level, we think of a God who is infinite, who is present everywhere, who is immanent in everything, and for whom the whole creation is one. And any spiritual seeker who evolves to this stage of evolution in the concept of God becomes a very broad-minded, a very humane, a very loving, broad-minded person who looks upon the whole creation as one spiritual family. So you find two types of evolutions. Evolution at the level of the seeker and evolution at the level of the sought. Evolution at the level of human beings who are evolving and trying to realize their goal, and also evolution at the level of the ideal towards which we are all evolving. All ideas of God, absolute reality, will come under this category, within this canvas. Now, how do we realize this infinite spiritual reality? How do we evolve towards this higher spiritual realization? To understand this, you have to refer to another basic human characteristic, namely the natural instinctive search that is found in all human beings for what we normally call freedom. Every human being is searching, seeking freedom. This again at two levels you find. Freedom for the senses. They tried to get freedom by giving freedom to the senses. That's what we normally find in all human pursuits. When we try to acquire wealth, when we try to acquire power, when we try to conquer the forces of external nature with the aid of science and technology, or when we even try to solve the mysteries, the mysterious questions related to the origin of the universe, origin of life, the meaning and significance of life. At all these levels, we are trying to get freedom, but at one level, we find that we are also trying to get freedom from the senses. So at the most empirical, mundane level, the search is for freedom by giving freedom to the senses. But at the philosophical and mystical level, to be more precise, at the spiritual level, we try to gain this freedom by seeking freedom from the tyranny of the senses, not by giving freedom to the senses. Because freedom to the senses leads to spiritual slavery. Freedom from the senses leads to spiritual liberation. That's why human civilization has produced innumerable philosophers. Among philosophers, I should especially mention those philosophers who sought a higher transcendental ideal in their life. Maybe you can find right from the early Greek period, from Thales onwards, right up to Philo and Plotinus, the two great Neoplatonists. A tradition of the great Greek philosophers who sought some kind of higher transcendental reality. And again from 18th century onwards, Kant, Hegel and others you find. Because from 5th century till 18th century, independent thought was crushed, strangled to death in Europe. Ever since Augustinian theology entered the scene, independent thought practically died an unnatural death in Europe. Then there was a revolt against this to gain freedom from the tyranny of the theological, the canonical authorities from 18th century onwards. But very often that search for freedom took a very negative term with utilitarianism, and again 19th century Marxian, Marxist socio-communist idea, humanism and positivism and so on. This subject perhaps is not very relevant here, just I'm giving just a glimpse of this. So even in philosophy, at one stage, there was a tendency to give freedom to the senses, as the utilitarians, Epicureans, and even 19th century socialist, idealists and humanists. But there was also a great trend in ancient Greece and also in Germany especially, under Kant and Hegel, an attempt to search for something transcendental. I mean, asking the question, why are we here? What's the mystery of life? What's the meaning of life? The special gift of human being, humanity. Because other members of the creation cannot ask this question. They have to follow the instinctive flow of evolution. But man alone, or woman rather, has the freedom, as the independent spirit to stand out, to stand away from the instinctive flow of evolution and ask the question, why am I here? Where am I heading? What's the meaning of this life? What's the ultimate goal of life? What's the mystery of life and death and so on? As a result of this unique gift of mankind, we got great philosophers and also we got great mystics. So the great mystical tradition opened the way to get freedom from the tyranny of the senses. Because they realized that freedom for the senses leads to slavery, spiritual slavery. And freedom from the tyranny of senses leads to spiritual liberation. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, an ancient text, most of you are familiar with. For those who may not be very familiar, I shall give you just an introduction. It is a very small part of an ancient book, which is very large in size. More than 100,000 verses in its shortest version, Mahabharata. To get an idea of how big this work is, you will keep in mind, it is almost 6 times the size of Homer's Iliad, Odyssey, and Virgil's Aeneid put together. That's the size of the book. More than 100,000 verses. Bhagavad Gita contains only 700 verses. So it is a very, very tiny fraction of the Lord's work. Now, in this book, which is in the form of a dialogue between a great philosopher and his friend, a dialogue which is allegorically is said to have taken place in a battlefield, to emphasize the point that Gita is a dialogue about problems in this life. It is not a dialogue between two hermits which took place somewhere in a forest or a deserted place. It is a dialogue between two men of action who are very much involved in doing their duties and responsibilities, who had to face tensions, conflicts, doubts, anxieties, and so on. In fact, the student, the one who asked the question, the disciple, was in a much more difficult state of mind than many modern human beings. He was facing the same kind of dilemmas, conflicts, anxieties, tensions, and problems which we are all facing. So when he started asking these questions, his teacher, Lord Krishna, gives the picture of a great spiritual seeker who has established a link to the infinite. It comes in the second chapter of the Gita. The question put by the disciple comes in the 54th verse, and from 55th to 72nd verse, the teacher is giving a graphic description of how to live in this world, how to face the daily problems in this world, without anxiety, without complaint, with perfect equanimity of mind, with perfect tranquility and peace. In the 54th verse, Arjuna, who is the disciple, asked the question, what are the characteristics of an ideal spiritual seeker, a man of illumination, or maybe woman of illumination for your sake? So, it's a simple question. How do we distinguish a spiritually enlightened person from other people? So, in answer to this, Lord Krishna gives a long description. The description actually forms one of the most important part of the text. I shall read a few verses, though I am not going to expound this text here. One important characteristic which Krishna describes is Dukkeshu anidvikdamana sukheshu vigadaspraha vitaraga bhayakrodha stidadhir maniruchyade. This is one important verse. Now, how do we distinguish a person, a spiritual seeker of wisdom, from other people? Generally, we know that when we become mature in age, in wisdom, in education, we become slow to react to tensions or to problems that we face. But this slowness doesn't necessarily mean spiritual wisdom. Tension may be there within us. The senses, the mind have become slow, so we become slow to react. Now, that won't do. So Krishna says, the one who is not at all perturbed in times of crisis, while confronting dilemmas or crisis, and the one who is never jubilant, overjoyed in times of happy situations. That person is the man or the woman of supreme spiritual illumination. His intellect is well established. Now, we have to remember, it doesn't mean that we become totally insensitive, crushing our natural ability to be sensitive to other people's problems. That is not the sign of spirituality. A spiritually illumined person will be very sensitive when he faces problems, not his problems, other people's problems. He will be totally untouched, unshaken, while he himself has to face problems. But when he has to help others in solving their problems, he will be very sensitive. Because one important characteristic of a spiritually evolved person is he becomes very humane. Now, I need not give illustrations. You look at the history of the great spiritual personalities of the world, beginning with Krishna or Jesus or Buddha or Shankara, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. He lived close to our own times, even while suffering from intense pain, because he was suffering from cancer, throat cancer. When some people came to him and tried to unfold their problems, asked for spiritual instructions, he didn't say, I feel pain, so I can't speak. In spite of suffering intense pain, he responded to their needs and their situations. And the same you find in Buddha's life, in the lives of Jesus, all great spiritual personalities. So the highest spiritual wisdom, the highest philosophical wisdom doesn't make you insensitive. It makes you more sensitive because you become more humane. We don't deaden our minds and intellects. Now, I can give one illustration from the life of a most unlikely spiritual personality, Shankaracharya. Suppose he was the exponent of non-dualistic philosophy, the one who taught the world Brahman is the only reality. This world that we live in, that we interact with in our everyday life, is only a relative entity. You know what happened? In his life, there is a scene. When his mother was about to die, the young man, he must have been around 17 years because he lived only for 32 years. He was wandering the Himalayas and he came all the way, traveling 3,500 kilometers, about 2,000 miles, and reached his home, consoled his mother, and prayed for her, and through his spiritual power, helped his aging mother to breathe her last in perfect peace and tranquility. Or look at the life of Jesus or Buddha. Of course, these stories are endless. Now, a spiritually illumined person, on the one hand, becomes very humane, very sensitive, very helpful, because when you establish a link to the infinite, you become the infinite. Because we are very often what we consider ourselves to be. We are very often what we think ourselves to be. If we think we are just this physical mechanism, then our goals, our aspirations won't be very different from that of some of the more evolved members of the animal kingdom. But if we think that we are evolved intellects, then maybe we will be on a par with the great scientists of the world. But if we strongly convince ourselves, if we consider ourselves to be something which is beyond the psychophysical mechanism, beyond the mind, senses, body, intellect, and so on, then we do become infinite. So when we consider ourselves to be infinite, we become infinite. That's the secret of the great mystics who were the embodiments of all the sublime, refined human characteristics that we normally read about or talk about. Love, compassion, mercy, broad-mindedness, sacrifice, and so on. All these characteristics become natural for a highly evolved spiritual person, because they identify themselves with the entire global family, not as an ideology, but as a matter of real experience. Every moment they experience their non-difference, their perfect identity with the whole creation. They are able to remain in a state of perfect tranquility and peace. In another important verse, in the same text, Lord Krishna gives the picture of how such a spiritually evolved person is able to sit calm and quiet while engaging in his or her duties and responsibilities. You think of an ocean. Say hundreds of rivers empty their waters to the ocean. The ocean remains undisturbed. If 100,000 rivers empty their waters to the Pacific Ocean won't be disturbed. Now, the ocean is not inviting the rivers to flow towards it. But the ocean is not avoiding the rivers either. The verse, for those of you who are interested, Apuryamanam achala pradishtham samudramapa pravishanti yadvad tadvad kama yam pravishanti sarve sashantim apnoti na kama kami. The last verse tells the message of the verse. It says, he or she obtains perfect peace and tranquility. Who? That's a description. The one who sits, the one who lives in this world and engages in his duties and responsibilities, but without any attachment, without any selfish desire, without any selfish obsession, but at the same time not remaining inactive, but by being active all the time. That person remains unaffected by whatever he does, by whatever comes to him, just as the ocean remains unaffected in spite of hundreds of rivers emptying the waters into it. So, such a spiritually illumined person he doesn't seek anything, but he doesn't avoid anything. Now, this is the picture of a spiritually evolved person. The text also gives the opposite picture. What happens if we give complete freedom to our senses? In fact, that is the main problem that we are facing in modern times. We do not want to be told that the senses cannot bring eternal joy and peace and tranquility. Intellectually we know, every educated person in modern times is fully convinced that whatever the senses bring are only momentary. The senses, the sensory pleasures can never give us permanent peace and happiness. You need not even be a spiritual seeker. You need not be a philosopher. You need not even be a serious student of psychology or philosophy to know that the sensory world can never bring permanent peace and happiness. But still, we are not able to keep this in mind while engaging in different activities. So very often we succumb, we surrender ourselves to the tyranny of the senses. The world we need, science and technology we need, maybe the comforts we need, but they should not become clutches, they should become walking sticks, to use the word. Science and technology, C.P. Snow, a famous thinker, once used the word, science and technology should not become clutches, because you use clutches, you have to lean upon them. You can't walk without clutches. But walking stick is something that we wield, that we can use. You can even get rid of your walking stick. You can even walk without walking stick. So science and technology and physical comforts, sensory pleasures should not become clutches, they should become walking sticks. But if we lean upon them too much, if we render ourselves incapable of walking without them, living without them, then we will never be able to enjoy this permanent peace of mind. There are two verses where gives a picture of how people degenerate psychologically by looking upon physical comforts as clutches rather than walking sticks. The verse is the dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangas teshu bhajayade sangar samjayade kamaha kama krodho bhijayade krodad bhavadi sammoha sammoha smriti vibhrama smriti bhramshat buddhinashu buddhinashat pranasidi. Two verses. I shall translate and explain in English, because first I tried to give the picture of the perfect spiritual person, the spiritual seeker of illumination, the evolved spiritual seeker who remains calm and quiet while being active, while engaging in duties and responsibilities, still remaining unaffected, because he looks upon physical comforts not as clutches but as walking sticks. Something that we use, not that we depend upon, that we lean upon. Now, in these two verses which I quoted just now, there's a picture. When we keep thinking always about external comforts, physical attractions, we become attached to them, then we direct all our efforts and energies towards acquiring them, and we are sure that we will never be able to acquire all that we seek. So disappointment is inevitable at some stage or other. And disappointment will make us bitter, and that will degrade us to the lowest level of psychological degradation, anxiety, depression, and disappointment. This problem can be avoided only by looking upon the world not as a drama in which we play our parts, but a drama that we watch sitting as a spectator. We have to live in this world. We have to make use of science and technology. We may have to make use of whatever is available, but they should not become dictators. They should not be able to dictate terms to our minds. We should be able to make proper use of them. And then we will be able to watch the whole drama as a witness, as a spectator, without participating in this drama. That will enable us to work without anxiety. That will enable us to enjoy peace even while facing the realities of life in this world. Now, in this verse, Lord Krishna makes an interesting statement. The one who goes beyond enjoyment has to go beyond grief. And the one who seeks to avoid grief should also avoid seeking enjoyment. So long as we are looking for enjoyment, we will have to encounter its opposite. So, by changing our attitude towards life as a whole, then the real aim is to go beyond not only pain, but also pleasure. Pleasurable events may happen, but if we allow ourselves to be swayed by them, to be influenced by them, then at one point, when that pleasurable events vanish, disappear, then pain and grief will start. So the real difference between a philosopher, a spiritually enlightened philosopher, and an average person is this. An average person who is not aware of this looks upon the senses as opportunities and eventually become enslaved by them. But a spiritual seeker is able to make use of the senses and sensory world without being enslaved by them. That's the main difference. All the great mystics, spiritual personalities, and thinkers the world has produced were men and women who tried to get freedom from the senses in their search for higher freedom, spiritual liberation, spiritual freedom. So I have just tried to give an outline, because by the word infinite, we always mean the stage where neither pleasure nor pain exists. When we establish a link, a connection to the infinite Atman, the Supreme Consciousness, which is omnipresent and immanent, it is the only transcendental reality, we are able to look upon the whole drama of life in this world with wisdom and equanimity and tranquility. Thank you. Namaskar.